Hello, welcome to this special Wise Revised video all about us parent. What does effective revision look like for our students and how do we make them do it? When I was putting this presentation together, I showed my wife this slide and she said, "What's with the avocados?" I said, well, it's just like a healthy diet. If you want your child to eat a healthy diet, you need to know what one is first. And so it is revision. As a parent, you should understand what effective revision is and what it looks like before you are able to encourage your child to partake in it. We'll be looking at a range of things in this video. If you want to jump ahead, you can. The first part of the video is about what does it look like, what is effective revision, and the second part of the video is all about how do you get your child to revise effectively. And if you want to look at the times at the bottom, you can jump ahead to the second half if that's what you're here for today. But let's start with the topic of revision itself. What is it? Well, if you've got the etymology of the word and you break it in two, you'll get re and vision. Again, look at again. That's effectively what revision is. However, that's an awful way to go about doing it, or when we think about how we understand what it is. You see, revision is storing information in your long-term memory so that you can easily access it and bring it to mind and use it. That's what revision is, and that should be the outcome of effective revision. You can think about it like a desk and a filing cabinet. These represent your two different types of memory. You've got a working memory and you've got your long-term memory. You're using your working memory right now as you listen to the words that I am saying and you analyze them and understand them. You might be thinking about what's in the background behind me. You might be thinking about what you're having for dinner. That's your working memory, and it's working right now. Your long-term memory is in the part of your brain where you store information that you sometimes need to bring to mind. So if I was to say, think of your phone number, you should be able to quickly, well, I would hope, be able to do that, or your postcode. Those things are stored in your long-term memory, and you are able to bring them to mind to use them when you need to. A great example of this in school is when we learn the times table. Now, from primary school, students are being hammered to know their times table. And you see this working as you go up through school and you get more complex equations in maths. And what you're effectively doing, if we use the desk analogy, is you're reaching into the filing cabinet and quickly bringing to mind the times table so that you can apply them to the more complex equation that you're looking at in front of you. If we change subject and thought, let's think about English literature. In your long-term memory, you should be able to bring to mind quotes from, let's say, Macbeth. And you can answer an essay question about something from Macbeth, and you can use that information that you've got stored in your long-term memory to answer those questions. If it's history, it's learning dates and kings and queens and facts. Now that should be the product of good revision. You want your child to be doing revision that's storing things in that memory that also they can then effectively bring to mind and use. What we want to focus on in school is the stuff that goes on the desk. We want our students to turn up to school with those things learned at home, so that in class time, in that precious classroom time, we're not simply learning facts. We're teaching our students how to use those facts, how to use that information and apply it to difficult questions. To take the desk analogy further, when thinking about working memory, it can be helpful to picture two desks. Now the one on the left is a clear desk. It's an open space. It looks pretty stress-free. The desk on the right is a very messy desk. Now the desk on the right represents the working memory of someone who's crammed for an exam. The night before the exam, they try to read and analyse and push into their brain as much as they can possibly remember. We'll see them at school, students who do this the next day, they've got their book open right up until they're walking into the exam room and putting it away before they go in, hoping they can retain all of that information they're about to use in the exam. Now, students can have limited success doing this. It is possible to cram and do all right at an exam. However, this is not the case when it comes to GCSEs or A-levels or any big subjects that come at the end of a 2 or 3 year course, especially when you're studying 3, 4, 5, 6 and maybe 10 different subjects. It simply doesn't work. The system our students need and they must get into doing is the system where at home they're using that long-term memory, they're committing time, they're putting effort into learning things that they can then bring to mind and utilize when they need to in the exams. Now, there's lots of different ways to revise, but frustratingly, the most popular ways to revise are the most ineffective. We know that these are 4 classic and popular methods of revision, which are just ineffective ways to commit things to your long-term memory. They're just not going to work. Rereading is the main thing that students do when it comes to revision. They'll pick up a textbook or their exercise book and they'll say they're revising and it looks like they're doing something, but actually what they're doing is very, very unlikely to have any sort of value at all. And it might be that they are massively wasting their time and effort with revision like that. Now, this is the meta study when it comes to revision. You can read this for yourself online. It actually was done in 2013. It was published, and the ramifications of it are still going into school life now in the UK. But when it came out, it did go pop on the internet, and there was loads about this, just showing that a lot of the things that students do are really ineffective when it comes to revision. If you go to the University of Leicester's website, you'll discover that this document, this research, this meta study that was conducted forms the basis of their advice for their students when it comes to revision. It is good stuff. Now, you don't have to go away and read it. I have summarized my take on it in the coming slides. The big 3 concepts when it comes to effective revision from that meta study are practice testing, deliberate practice, and distributed practice. Let me explain what those 3 are right now. Practice testing is simply testing yourself. It can be, at one end of the spectrum, asking yourself a question in your head and then answering it, right through to the other end of the spectrum, sitting down and completing a past paper or a practice paper. Both examples the same thing. You are questioning yourself about your knowledge. This is really key for effective revision. In Wise Revise, we call it putting your brain to work. If you're not putting your brain to work, it's unlikely the revision you're doing is effective. Deliberate practice. Now, this is a partial and wordy way of saying something very simple, which is simply that students need to focus their revision on what they don't know, not what they do know. That may seem very simple, but in the past I've asked students to show me how they revise, and they do the same thing. They pick up a textbook and they start to do this. And eventually they stop on a page and they look at it and they look at me and they look at it and they look at me. And I say, what are you revising there? And without looking at the textbook, they are very articulate and able to explain to me the topic that they were just had open in front of them in the textbook. And it comes to light that actually what the students often do, what we all are likely to do, is we actually start to focus on the stuff we actually already know when it comes to revision. Students will get a pleasure from when they're revising, looking at stuff they actually know, because they'll feel good about it. They're like, oh yeah, I remember this. This is a topic I know well. I'll revise this, which actually is really a silly thing to do. Because when it comes to revision, they should be focusing on those Achilles heels, those areas of the subject and the content and the knowledge and the skills that they haven't got down yet, that they don't know properly yet. The final one is distributed practice, and this simply means not doing all your revision for one subject, one topic in one go for a couple of hours, but actually just doing 20 minutes here and then maybe going away from it and coming back a few weeks later and doing another 20 minutes or half an hour and doing it over time and distributing that revision over time. And actually it's shown to be way more effective to do little and often than very long sessions on one topic. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So that's the concepts. What are the methods? Now, the 4 Wise Revise methods that we educate students to do here at our school, and there's videos about these on the Wise Revise channel if you want to get your child doing these, are number 1, self-testing flashcards, number 2, practice papers, number 3, Cornell notes for revision, and number 4, self-testing mind maps. So let's start by thinking about self-testing flashcards. I've got a flashcard here. I'm an RS teacher, and our RS GCSE, here's one of the key words that we have. I'm not sure you can make that out there with a light. Incarnation, becoming flesh. We've got the key word there, incarnation, and the definition, becoming flesh. Now you can imagine a student using this to revise. They maybe go through their cards, get to that one, oh yeah, incarnation, becoming flesh, great, next one. This is a really, really ineffective and poor flashcard. It can be made immediately more effective by doing something very simple, which is this: putting the keyword on one side and then the definition on the other. And the reason for that is that when the student is going through their testing themselves, they get to the keyword, they go incarnation, and they have to think hard about what that word means before they can turn it over and see the definition. Now, it might be they remember the definition and they feel good about that. It might be that they don't. But actually, by going through the process of struggling with it and thinking hard about it, it's far more likely for that to go into their mind and be stored in their long-term memory so they can then bring it to mind. And the great thing about flashcards is there's lots of different ways you can use them. And if you want to watch my video on effective flashcards, please do. There's more information on that. Next up is practice papers. Now, I believe this is the best way to revise. I think that variation is the spice of life, and it's important to do lots of different methods, but practice papers are the bomb. The reason for this is I often use the analogy of if I was a boxer and if I had a fight in 6 months' time against a particular opponent, I would want all my sparring partners to be as similar to my opponent as possible. I'd want to learn how they attack, how they defend, how I can best distribute my weight in order to get around their defense, etc. And the reason for this would be when I eventually got to the fight, I would be in the best position possible to see what was coming. In the same way, when we take a practice paper, we get to know our enemy. We get to understand the style of questions that are going to be asked, as well as the content that might come up. I don't mention this in a boasting way, but just to point out, in my ICT A level, I got 100% in my A level exam. And the reason for that, I believe, is I had 3 past papers, and I would do the past paper and I would write down what score I got, and then I'd do the same paper 2 weeks later, write down what score I got, and I'd do the same paper 3 weeks, and I'd just keep doing it until I'd done all 3 papers 3 times each. Do you know, when I got to the exam, I opened it up, and I think the first question was exactly the same as one that I'd done before. I thought, oh, I know that question. Oh, next question. I know that style of question. I know exactly what the examiner's looking for here. Next question. Oh, I've done a really similar question to this, and I know exactly what the mark scheme says about it. So practice papers are a fantastic way to prepare for exams, and I can't big them up enough. I mean, if you go onto the AQA website, OCR website, exam boards, you'll be able to find some past papers on there and mark schemes. You can also purchase them from different companies. My best advice would be talk to the teachers in your school about where the best place to get those are. They might even have some that they can give you themselves as well. So big fan of practice papers. Next up is Cornell Notes for Revision. This is a really, really effective way to revise. And rather than go into detail about this now, I would recommend you watch my video. There's a link to it there, session 10, using Cornell Notes for Revision. Really, really effective way to do revision. And finally, mind mapping. Mind mapping is like Marmite. Not everyone loves it, but 2 great ways to use a mind map. Firstly, you finish a topic, you get a blank sheet of paper, you write down every single thing you can remember about that topic. You then get a textbook out or your exercise book and you add anything that you think is missing or change anything that's not right. And then you see what links you can build between those things just to test yourself. Remember, self-testing is key in all of these methods. Another way to do a mind map is to draw one which just uses symbols and letters and codes. And then you pull it out and you use it as a self-testing device to see what you can remember from that topic. It's really, really important that your child arrives at their exams feeling confident that they have done some revision and they're prepared for it. And the reason for that is to do with the way their brain works and the way all our brains work. There's a chemical in the brain, a hormone that gets produced when we're under stress. It's called serotonin. It's the same thing that happens in your brain if you've ever had that experience of meeting someone and forgetting their name. And you're talking to them and you're like, and you're hoping you're not going to have to use their name because then you'll be caught out and they'll know that you've forgotten their name. But the weird thing is, as soon as you walk away from that situation, you go, ah, Bill, it's Bill. How did I forget Bill's name? That was weird. And what is happening is serotonin is flooding your brain and you're feeling stressed about it and you're unable to function as best you can. You're unable to bring things to mind. You're unable to access things in that long-term memory. Now, a student who hasn't revised for exams turns up with a double whammy of problems. The first problem is they don't know the content and they're not ready because they haven't revised, they haven't prepared, they don't know what questions are coming up. But then on top of that, they might have a brain flooded with serotonin because they're feeling stressed and they know they haven't revised. So it's actually a double problem. A student who feels confident and they've done a lot and they've done what they can to get by is going to have a brain full of cortisol. That's that fantastic hormone chemical that gets everything sparking and helps brain synapses like get together and helps remember things and make things easily accessible from the long-term memory to be brought to mind. And so if your child is feeling confident in what they've revised, this is going to be a real blessing to them. On top of the content, the ability to answer the questions, and then pow, cortisol, baby, I'm ready to go. So let's think for a moment then about the teenage brain. As we enter this second half, we think about how do you get your child to revise effectively? Well, the first thing to think about is, and I've got a great other video on this where we're going into far more detail, is that the teenage brain effectively though is different to an adult brain, different to a child's brain. In fact, during the teenage years, your child's brain is actually restructuring itself in quite a big way. And part of that, and I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but part of that means that they're making decisions with the emotional part of their brain, which means that sometimes you can ask a teenager a very rational, perfectly fine question to ask and get a very over emotional or aggressive or unpleasant response, and you're suddenly like, whoa, where did that come from? That was not a normal or fair reaction. What was that about? And that's because they're making decisions with their emotional part of the brain. We also know that teenagers are massive risk takers. They're very, very poor at evaluating a risk, and so can make really awful and dangerous decisions, and as well as both of those things, as being emotional and risk takers, they are big on short-term gratification. So they want to do things that are going to make them feel good in that moment and think less about the long-term picture. So they might not feel like revising and would prefer to play a console, like a computer game, get their phone out, short-term gratification, eat something, you know, just make me feel good now. You know, the exams are so far away, I can't comprehend that's going to make me feel good then. And so it's helpful to understand that about your teenage child when you get to talk to them about revision. And so having important discussions with teenagers can be really difficult, and discussing revision with them can be quite problematic. Now, there's different ways about doing it, and you might find something that works really well for you and your child. One great bit of advice given to me once was when talking to a teenager, if you can do something like drive somewhere with them, where they're in the passenger seat and you're driving, you can have a really good conversation, which takes away from that serious, heavy, in the kitchen, everything's really quiet, you're focusing on each other, intense is the word I was looking for. You can take the intensity away. If you can do something together, like cook a meal together and chat, that's a great time to have a good conversation. Now, a few things I would recommend when having a conversation with a teenager about revision is to spend time asking very good questions and listening very carefully to them, and try and get them to come up with an image of their future, which hasn't happened yet, that fills them with joy. Now, for every student, this is going to be very different. It might be a career, it might be a university they want to go to, it might be a course they want to do at A-level, or something like that. It might be something completely different. It might be a family member who they want to make proud. It might be the feeling of on results day, opening an envelope and seeing a particular set of grades on there. Through talking to your child, if you ask them the right questions and listen real carefully and patient and probe them with good questions, you might get to the point where you literally see their body language changes. And there will be something they talk about, an image of the future, which can't help but make them smile. Now, that's the dream. Now, if you can get there with them, it's a really powerful tool moving forward. So when you talk to them about the second point on there, how bad do you want it? How bad do you want that day to be? How bad do you want that day to occur? How badly do you want that career? How badly do you want that to happen in the future? Do you want it badly enough that you're going to put your phone away for an hour on a revision night? Do you want it badly enough that you're not going to go out with your mates this Saturday because you've got a test the next week? How badly do you want it? And if you can get them to narrow down that dream, that image of the future that fills their heart with joy and excitement, you can shorten that right down and just give them a few words that are going to bring them to that point. So what about a career? What about a dream job? Come on. What about a dream? We got the dream. We're going for the dream. You want the dream real bad. You're not going to do that because you want that. That's your outcome. And get them to focus on this future event that's going to make the current, the present decision for them with their revision much easier. And I'll come back to that in a bit. A great model for discussions is keep, scrap, change, or start, scrap and change, and get them to think about how you as a team, you and them, are going to get them amazing grades, how you and them are going to work together to make sure their revision is effective and fantastic. And it's really important to bring them in at the beginning of the conversation. Now, some parents are blessed to be in a financial situation where they're able to offer their children financial rewards for great GCSE grades. And I was not in that position growing up, and not many people are. But if you can, that can be a real helpful carrot to say, you know, if you get a 9, you get £9, 8, you get £8, etc. But talking to my students at school, I've asked them, what would you really love a reward to be from your parent? And many of them have spoken about a day in the future when they get to go out and spend time with their parents. It's just a special day. It doesn't have to be expensive, but they're just going out together and they're doing something fun and different. And you might talk to your child about it. It might be that that's something they would be really psyched about. And it's something they can look forward to after revision, after GCSEs, in the future, once all the stress is gone and they can just enjoy that time. So do talk to them about what would be good. And finally, phones. What do we do about phones? A recent study has come out which has shown that a phone that is turned off but is in the same room as a student, as a teenager, is going to take their concentration off what they're doing. It's going to be a distraction even if it's turned off. The reason for this is because generally teenagers are very keen on two things: trends and friends. And these bad boys give them access to both, all right? They want to be in contact with their mates. They want to know what's going on in their social groups. That's really, really important to them. They also want to know if something is kicking off on TikTok. They want to be the first one on that. They want to be on top of the trends when they come out. And this is their portal to both of those things. So even if it's turned off and it's put away, it's going to be a distraction. So my advice would be with phones, they're off and they're out of the room. And I would recommend that you look at that information with your child and show them it and say, you know, you want to do well, you want it bad. I bet you want it bad enough that you're going to agree with this. You're going to turn this off and we're going to put it out of the room. And I'm going to help you with that. I'm going to help keep you accountable because I want you to do well. You want to do well. Let's do this together. There are lots of issues that you're going to find when it comes to talking about planning and getting your child to revise. Everything from the level of their anxiety to arguments you might have with them about when they should and shouldn't be revising, concerns you might have, whether they're avoiding some topics altogether and seem to be prioritizing the ones that they enjoy most. And the answer to many of these problems can be found in a good revision plan. So a few things to think about when we start planning revision. The first one is to think about the slots that you will spend on each subject. And I'd recommend between 20 and 30 minutes for each subject. There's loads we could talk about that, but effectively, if I shorten it, it's just that's how much time your brain can concentrate on one subject tops before it becomes very ineffective revision. So 20 to 30 minutes on each subject. I recommend 6 days per week. You need to have at least one day off. For some students, that's too much too soon. They're going to have to build up to that slowly. And then on those 6 days, at least one session per day. And let's have a look at what that might look like. Here's the Wise Revised Revision Plan. You can download this from the link below, absolutely free. Print it off if you like. And what you want to do with it, firstly, is decide what time of day, each day, your child might start their revision. I'd recommend you do this with them in conversation and say, right, on Monday, what time are you going to start? Let's go for 5:30. So here's an example of one potential student's week. So on the Monday, you can see here on the Monday, they've got their subjects in. We've got English literature, maths, RS, and biology. For each subject as well, they've been very specific about what individual topic they're going to be looking at. And hopefully maybe in a conversation you might say, well, in the PPE, you know, in your pre-public exam, your English teacher said that your Macbeth quotes were lacking. So we'll have 25 minutes there on Macbeth quotes. For maths, we'll do trigonometry. In RS, you can look at your quotes about war. And in biology, classic, let's look at some photosynthesis. On the right-hand side, you can see you can just tick those off there when you've covered them. As you progress through the week, it might be that it starts to look like this. And you'd make this plan the week before. You say, well, that's what next week looks like. And you can see there the coverage. Now, on some days, you'll notice there's just one session. And on a couple of days, there's no sessions at all. And it might be with your child, you want to start with a couple of sessions and then build up. As you can see from this slide, we've added in now methods of revision. And it's important to vary the methods. And you'll see in the bottom right there, flashcards, practice papers, mind maps, corner maps, and you'll tick them off as you go to make sure you're varying the different methods. This might look in practice like your child is sat at their desk or on the dining room table. I used to revise on my dining room table, and I would stack all the equipment I would need on one side. I'd then start revising with a little alarm clock. Wouldn't use my phone because phones are out of the room. After 25 minutes, the timer goes off and I move that to the next side and I grab the next thing and I start on that. It might be flashcards, and I'm doing my key card flashcards for a bit for 25 minutes. 25 minutes is up, I then grab a practice paper and I do 25 minutes on the practice paper, and when that timer goes, even if I'm in the zone, I get to the end of that sentence, I put full stop, I put that to the side and I grab my maths textbook to practice my trigonometry. 25 minutes on that, that goes to the side, and then I get my sheet out to do my mind map. And the blessing of this system, as many students have told me since we've been doing this, is that the guilt is removed from them. They've decided what they're going to do, they do their revision, and once their revision is finished, they're free for the evening. There are numerous benefits of this. It ensures that the revision is being done, it ensures that the subjects are covered, it ensures that that deliberate practice, that focusing on the weak areas, the Achilles heels, are covered. As we said, it alleviates the guilt. Your child can finish revising for the night and go and play the PlayStation and enjoy it, go and play the guitar and enjoy it, go and watch TV as a family, and they've done their revision for the day so they can feel guilt-free in enjoying those things. Reduce arguments. You know, you've decided with them, you've discussed it with them the week before. This is the plan for the week. I'm going to hold you accountable for it because you want me to. And that's what we're going to do. That's the plan. And then there's no argument about, well, shouldn't you be revising? Or I'm not sure you've done enough revision tonight. It's in the plan, you've agreed it. And that's what you're going with. It also, over time, builds confidence. It builds your child's confidence that they're preparing well for their exams. So when they get there, they'll feel great and ready to go. So what can you do? How can you help them? Well, some things you can give them are time, space, resources, and testing. I never had a desk when I was growing up to do my revision on, but I had a discussion with my mum about it, and we had one section of the dining room table that was my section to revise on. I kept all my stuff in like a pile down on the ground, and when it was the evening, I would have my revision space. That was my Toby's part of Mr. Wood's part of the dining room table, and that was my space, and I would do that in the evening. And during that time, I'd be left alone to kind of get on with it, trusted that I was going to revise during that time. I'd also have some resources. Now, textbooks are a really great resource to have, and revision guides. And the best thing to do with that is contact your school, contact your teachers, and find out what the best revision guides are for them, for the courses that your child is doing. And finally, offer to test your child. I've asked all the Year 11s in our school whether you would love it, hate it, or not mind if your parent asked you, can I test you on this? Can I help by testing you? And a third of students have said, I'd hate that, but a third have said, I'd love that, and a third would say, I wouldn't mind. And it's a really helpful thing that you can do for them if they are up for it. So do ask them if you can test them. Finally, here's some students who concern me. These aren't real photos. Well, they're real photos, but they're stock photos and the names have been changed. But these are students who I meet every year who concern me when exams are on the horizon. Firstly, Fearful Fred. Now, Fearful Fred, he knows he needs to start revising, but he is paralyzed by the fear of failure. The exams at the end of Year 11 are like a giant mountain that he will never be able to climb. And as it gets closer and closer, that fear is just preventing him from even getting going in the first place. Then there's Popular Paul. Popular Paul, he finds his success, his worth, he sees huge value in friendships and popularity. And it's to the detriment of his GCSEs. And he sees these things, his friendships, his popularity, is way more important to him than his GCSEs. And the outcome of that will be that he doesn't put the revision in and he ends up underachieving. Then there's Naive Neve. Now, Naive Neve, she has always been successful from primary school, years 5, year 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. She's always done the same methods, and her tests, her short, small tests have gone well. At the end of year 10, she had her end of year exams. They didn't go very well. She puts it down to she needs to do more, a higher quantity of what she's been doing. But unfortunately, she's been using very ineffective methods. She's been rereading, she's been highlighting, and she doesn't appreciate yet that those methods are insufficient. They're not going to get her the grades that she deserves when it gets to the end of year 11. And finally, there's Stubborn Steph. And Stubborn Steph has always been successful. She's just like Neve, but she just refuses flat out to change her method. She's like, no, this is how I like to revise. This is how I'm going to do it. I'm not going to try anything new. So how do we respond to students like this? Well, if your child, maybe one of these resonates with you already, maybe you don't, you can skip past this bit if you want, but Fearful Fred, effectively, he needs to start revising today. He needs to start a revision plan, which starts really small, maybe just a couple of 25-minute sessions. Start small and then slowly build. And that just beginning it, taking those small steps towards the GCSEs is going to help him hugely, and it's going to start just to come along naturally once he just gets going. He just needs to get going. Popular Paul needs a couple of things. He needs to be shown the value of those GCSEs. At the moment, he's got his popularity and his friends are way more important to him, but we need to show him the value of his GCSEs. He needs to be sat down and talked to and questioned and shown, you know, what do you think life is going to look like at 16, 18, 21, 25? Can you see how weighty and how valuable these qualifications are going to be when you have to start making decisions about your future and about what career you want to do? You're going to want as much option as possible when it gets to that. He also needs some clear boundaries about his social time as well. Now, naive Neve, she needs to be shown the stats. She's the sort of student who we need to sit down and say, look, just look at this meta study. Look what it's suggesting. Look what it's saying about the revision you're doing. You want to do well, Neve? This is how you do well. It's all there. All the research is showing it. Take it on board. Start doing it today. Stubborn Steph, however, I don't know what to do with that. I see students like this every year, and they're stuck in their ways and they don't want to try something different, and they come out with lower grades than they should. So final points just to end on. If your child comes home from our school and says, I don't know how to revise, it's not true. They've been shown how to revise. They've been shown the theory, they've been taught the practice, and then they've done the practice in front of their tutor. So they do know how to revise. And if they do say that, get them on Wise Revise on the channel, get them watching all the videos on flashcards, Cornell note taking, mind maps, practice papers, it's all on there. Help yourself. Phones off and out of the room. If your child says they're off to revise with their mates, they can't. It's impossible. It's impossible to revise with mates. They need to focus on their practice testing of those specific subjects that are, you know, their Achilles heels. They need to test themselves on those, practice those. It's very, very difficult to do that with a friend because, as we said before, friends and trends are more important, and they want to get rid of those distractions. It's impossible to revise in front of the TV. If your child comes home from our school and says, hey, I've done my revision at school, I don't need to do anything tonight, that's not true. What we've done at school is not revision. We're working on how to structure answers to questions. We want them to revise at home to build that long-term memory so they can bring that to school and learn how to get the best grade possible from those memories, that information they've learned at home. I've got no revision. Never true from this point on. They've always got revision. The content involved with every GCSE is huge, and it's likely your child's doing 8, 9 or 10 GCSEs. They've got revision. As soon as year 9 is gone, they've always got revision. And finally, the revision calendar is a great thing that will definitely pay off. Here's a revision calendar I got through the post this week. I don't know if you can see that on there. What you do is get a cheap calendar, stick it up on the wall this Christmas. When January starts, every single day that your child does some revision, get them to come down and put a big X. Even if they do 25 minutes, big X on that calendar. Now, a couple of months' time, they're going to have a wobble, and they're going to say, oh my goodness, I'm stressed, the GCSEs are coming, I'm not ready. And you're going to take them to the calendar, and you're going to go, look at all these X's. Look at how much revision you have done. You are in a great place. You have done exactly what you need to do. Do not stress about this. You are in the right direction. You've been doing the right thing, and this is going to pay off. You just got to keep going. Thank you so much for watching this. Hope that was helpful. Please drop any comments below. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to Wise Revise. I would appreciate that. If you enjoyed this, share it with your friends, and see you again at some point in the future.